One day, a merchant received news that his ships had sunk in a violent storm. The poor man lost everything he owned, leaving only his small house in the town. Two greedy sisters did not like this situation at all. They became lazy, lying in bed and grumbling, leaving all the housework to Beauty. After some time, the merchant heard that one of his lost ships had arrived at the port. Before setting out to find out if the news was true, he asked his daughters what gifts they would like him to bring back. The spirits of the two greedy sisters lifted immediately. "Dresses and jewels," they said. "And you, Beauty?" the merchant asked. "Just a rose. That's enough for me," said Beauty. A few days later, the merchant set off to return home, sad and poor again because he had lost the money from the last ship to swindlers. Not knowing where he was going, the merchant and his horse trudged through the snow for hours until he suddenly saw a very beautiful castle with bright lights shining out of the windows. Finally, realizing that waiting was pointless, he tied his horse in the stable and ate the food waiting for him on a long table in the hall. Then he went to sleep in a bed. When he woke up in the morning, he found new clothes laid out for him. A nice breakfast was waiting for him downstairs. As the merchant was leaving the castle, he noticed the roses in the garden. "At least I should keep my promise to Beauty," he thought to himself. He picked one of the roses. But as soon as he did, a terrible roaring filled the air. A fearsome beast emerged from behind the bushes. It was so terrifying that the merchant nearly fainted from fear. "You ungrateful man," roared the beast. "I saved your life, I fed you, clothed you, and you steal my beautiful roses. You deserve to die right now." The merchant fell to his knees before the beast. "I was taking the rose for one of my daughters, sir," he said. "Go, ask your daughters if one of them will live with me in exchange for your life. If none accept my offer, you will die within 3 months." At home, the two selfish sisters did not care as they listened to their father recount his terrifying adventures. They were furious that their father had not brought them clothes and jewels. But Beauty did not react like them. "Father, let me go," she said without hesitation. 3 months later, the merchant went to the castle with Beauty. The beast appeared. Beauty began to shiver with fear because the beast was as terrifying as her father had described. "Did you come here of your own free will?" asked the beast. "Yes," said Beauty. "Then your father will leave in the morning and he will never come back here." When her father left in the morning, Beauty was left alone. She cried for a while, but then she remembered a dream she had and felt a bit better. In her dream, a fairy had said, "Do not worry. The courage you've shown to save your father's life will not go unrewarded." Then she explored the castle. She was surprised to find a door with her name written on it. She opened it and looked inside. The room was furnished exactly as she wished, filled with books and musical instruments. She picked up a book. On the book, in golden letters, it read, "My dear Queen, your wish is my command. I wish I could see my father right now," Beauty said out loud. As soon as she said this, her father's image appeared in a mirror on the far side of the room. This way, Beauty's feelings of loneliness and homesickness were somewhat alleviated. That night at dinner, the beast appeared. "May I watch you, Beauty? You are the owner here." "No, my castle is at your command." The beast hesitated for a moment. "Do you find me very ugly?" Beauty looked up at the beast. "I didn't want to say it, but I must be honest." "Yes, I find you ugly," she said. The beast asked, "Will you marry me?" "No, beast, never." Every night at 9, the beast would come to talk to Beauty. Beauty began to get used to the beast as days went by. She even started to worry about him when he was late. If only, she thought, he wasn't so ugly. If only he didn't ask me to marry him over and over. One day, Beauty saw in the mirror that her father was sick. She immediately told the beast she wanted to go to see her father. "You may go, Beauty, but you know I will die of grief if you do not return, don't you? I fear you will want to stay with your father and not come back. But if you change your mind and want to return, just place your ring on the table next to your bed. You will wake up in my castle in the morning." The next morning, Beauty woke up in her father's house. Her father was overjoyed to see her. That day, her sisters, who had recently married, came to visit their father. When they arrived home and saw their beloved sister, they were green with envy. "Let's play a trick on her, make her stay a week longer, then the beast will come and kill her." The two sisters tearfully told Beauty they did not want to part with her. Beauty decided to stay another week. Beauty realized she missed the beast as much as she missed her father. One day, she dreamed of the beast lying stiff and lifeless in the castle's garden. She immediately took off her ring and placed it on the table beside her bed. When she woke up, she was in the beast's castle. She waited for the beast that evening. He He did not come. Suddenly worried, she ran out of the castle into the garden. The beast was lying there, stretched out. She ran to him. The beast's heart was still beating. "I thought you would not return. I was prepared to starve myself to death. But I love you, beast. I want to marry you." At that moment, the castle seemed to become even more beautiful and radiant. Beauty looked around for a while, then turned back to the beast. But the beast was no longer there. In his place stood a young and handsome prince. "I want the beast," Beauty cried. The prince then stood up. "The beast is me," he said. "A wicked fairy had cast a spell on me, turning me into a creature so ugly that no one could bear to look at me. If you had not said you wanted to marry me, I would have remained like that until the end of my life." Before long, Beauty and the beast were married. They became the happiest prince and princess the world had ever seen.
Once upon a time, there was a sweet girl who was loved by everyone, but most of all by her grandmother. The grandmother was always uncertain what to give to her as a gift. One day, she gave the girl a cap made of red velvet. The cap suited her so well that she didn't want to wear anything else, and hence she was known as Little Red Riding Hood. One day, her mother asked Little Red Riding Hood to take some wine and cookies to her grandmother, who was ill and weak. Her mother instructed her to be quick, to not stray from the path, and to be careful. Little Red Riding Hood set off for her grandmother's house, located half an hour away from the village in the forest. Upon entering the forest, she encountered a wolf. Unaware of his wicked nature, she did not fear him. The wolf inquired where she was going and what she was carrying. Naively, Little Red Riding Hood shared the details about her grandmother's house and the food she was carrying. The wolf, realizing that the young girl would be a tastier meal than the old woman, plotted to eat both. He distracted Little Red Riding Hood by pointing out the beauty of the forest, which led her to stray from the path to pick flowers for her grandmother. Meanwhile, the wolf went to the grandmother's house, swallowed her, and dressed in her clothes, lying in her bed. When Little Red Riding Hood arrived, the wolf, disguised as the grandmother, swallowed her too. A passing huntsman heard the wolf snoring loudly inside and decided to investigate. Realizing the situation, the huntsman saved both Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother by cutting open the wolf's stomach. They filled the wolf's stomach with stones, and when he tried to rise, he collapsed and died. In the end, everyone was happy. The huntsman took the wolf's fur, the grandmother recovered, and Little Red Riding Hood vowed to never stray from the path and to heed her mother's advice.
Once upon a time, on a cold and dark winter night, a little match girl named Elisa stood shivering under the street lamps. She was trying to earn a living by selling her last matches. While people around her spent time in warm rooms at their homes in peace, Elisa was left out in the open and alone. With her freezing fingers, she pulled out her last match and struck it. Suddenly, the match ignited and lit up the surroundings. With the glow of the match, Elisa drifted into her world of imagination. With the first light, she started looking through a window. Inside, there was a warm room. A Christmas tree, decorated with colorful ornaments, was shining brightly. A happy family, including a father, mother, and a little girl, were chatting and singing joyfully. Elisa watched the family's happiness with a warm feeling growing inside her. Then another match was lit. This time, Elisa found herself at a dining table set for a magnificent feast. The table was filled with delicious foods, colorful fruits, and sweets. People gathered in love and joy, enjoying a pleasant evening together. Elisa's stomach growled as she hadn't eaten for a long time, but she just watched the table. Elisa had one last match in her hand. She struck it, and the match glowed again. This time, she found herself next to a warm stove. The stove, with its dancing flames, promised warmth. Elisa tried to warm her hands around the stove, but the match burned out completely and its light faded. Elisa found herself back in the cold winter night under the street lamp. She had no matches left, and the cold was still biting. However, she carried the warmth and hope of her dreams within her. She etched the beauty she saw in the light of the matches into her heart and believed that her life would now have more hope and love. Elisa, eager to wake up to a new day filled with hope, continued to walk the streets. Because in her life, no matter what, she realized that nothing could extinguish the hope inside her. Once upon a time in a distant land, there lived a beautiful girl with her father and stepfamily. Her name was Cinderella. Her mother had passed away at a young age, so her father raised her alone. However, when her father remarried, Cinderella's life took a drastic turn. The new stepmother and her two daughters did not like Cinderella's presence. They were jealous of her beauty and kindness and treated her very cruelly. The stepmother made Cinderella work like a servant in the house and did not allow her to wear nice clothes. The stepsisters constantly belittled and mocked her. One day, Cinderella's father went on a long business trip. In his absence, the stepmother and daughters treated Cinderella even worse. They sent her to the worst corner of the attic and made her do all the household chores alone. Although Cinderella was very sad, she couldn't find the strength to oppose them. Over time, Cinderella's only friends became the mice in the attic and the birds that sang to her. On cold nights, she would secretly go down and sleep next to the extinguished fireplace for warmth. One day, big news spread in the town square. The prince was going to hold a grand ball at the palace, and all the young ladies of marriageable age were invited. The stepmother and daughters were thrilled upon hearing this and started preparing for the ball immediately. Cinderella also wanted to go to the ball, but her stepmother did not allow her. Moreover, by assigning her even more chores, she made it impossible for Cinderella to prepare for the ball. When the stepmother and sisters went to the palace, Cinderella was left alone and burst into tears. Just then, a fairy appeared and came to Cinderella's aid. The fairy gave her a magnificent ball gown and glass slippers with her magical powers. She also turned a pumpkin and mice into a luxurious carriage and white horses. However, there was one condition: Cinderella had to leave the ball before midnight, as all the magic would end at that hour. Thanks to the fairy, Cinderella attended the ball and caught everyone's attention. The prince fell in love with her at first sight. They danced together, and Cinderella was enchanted by the time spent with the prince. However, as midnight approached, Cinderella had to leave hastily. While escaping, she dropped one of her glass slippers on the stairs. The prince searched the entire country to find Cinderella and finally reached her home. The stepsisters tried on the slipper, but it fit none of them. In the end, Cinderella tried on the slipper, and it fit perfectly. The prince was overjoyed to find her again and proposed to her. Cinderella accepted, and they lived happily ever after, in happiness for the rest of their lives.
Once upon a time, in a land of kingdoms, there lived a king and a queen. The king had a child. To celebrate the birth of his newborn, he threw a feast for all the people. After the feast, the king shared with those around him how happy being a father made him, as he and his wife had long awaited a child. He then amused all the guests by telling them about his recent experiences of learning to change the baby's diaper. When it was time for the guests to give their gifts to the baby princess, each one presented theirs. After everyone had given their gifts, it was the turn of 12 fairies. "My gift to the princess is happiness," said the first fairy. The guests applauded joyously, and the king was overjoyed. "My gift is beauty," said the second fairy. "My gift is intelligence," said the third. Thus, 11 fairies gave their gifts one by one. As the 12th fairy was about to give her gift, the whole palace shook with a thunderous noise. The doors burst open, and an old woman entered, dragging her feet. Everyone closed their eyes in fear at the sight of her. "The 13th fairy!" they all shouted in unison. The 13th fairy approached the princess's cradle. The baby cooed and reached out her little hand towards the fairy. Then suddenly the fairy said, "My gift to the princess is that on her 15th birthday, as soon as she pricks her finger on a needle, she will die." And she laughed wickedly. With another thunderous noise, the evil fairy disappeared. The palace doors slammed shut. A dreadful silence followed. Then the queen began to cry. The 12th fairy stepped forward. "I might not be able to break the curse, but I can alter it." The baby grew into a healthy, beautiful, young woman. The king and queen had long forgotten the curse, but she discovered a door she had never noticed before. Opening it, she found a staircase winding upwards. At the top, there was a door with a golden key. Upon opening the door, she saw an old woman inside a small room, spinning something on a wheel. The old woman. "Don't just stand there. Come, try it yourself." The woman extended the needle towards the princess. The sharp point of the needle pricked the princess's finger, and she collapsed to the ground. The entire palace fell into a deep sleep. Years slowly passed. The palace was forgotten. A handsome prince was passing by. He noticed a place covered in thorny bushes, and he drove his horse towards the thorny path. He drew his sword and began to cut through the bushes. He came across a tower with a half-open door. He found a winding staircase leading upwards. The prince climbed the stairs. He found himself in front of the princess. "Sleeping Beauty," he whispered. Overwhelmed by her beauty, he leaned down and kissed her forehead. The moment the prince kissed her, the princess opened her eyes. With her awakening, the princess saw the prince standing before her. For the first time in 100 years, a smile appeared on her lips. "Will you marry me?" the prince asked softly. "Yes," said the princess and kissed the prince. The prince and princess got married and lived happily ever after.